Yeah, thank you, Beverage Trade Network. Welcome to CIATTI. Come on back. Let's go see what we do around here at the CIATTI and the brokerage firm. As most of you might know or don't know, the CIATTI company is 10 offices around the world, and we move bulk wine and grapes up and down the eastern and western seaboard. As you take a look around what happens around here, this is the main room where a lot of the shipping and samples are being held for sales that are happening these days. We come in, we bring everything in-house, we relabel it to send back out to all the buyers that are looking for specific products, rather it be in your Napas, Sonomas, or just all California products. And then we also have a little bit of a connection with the rest of the international community as well. And if you come back down the rest of the way, we like to see is, like I said, with any other office that exists around the world, is mostly a lot of desks and a lot of computers and phones with people selling bulk wine products and everything that exists around here.
Hey guys, this is Sid here from Inside the Drinks Business. It's great to be at CIATTI office today. Todd, thanks for joining me here.
Yeah, thank you, Sid.
Todd's representing CIATTI Brokerage Company, which is the world's biggest brokerage firm, I believe, right, Todd?
Correct.
So great to be here. We're going to talk about how the wine brokerage business works, and a little bit about spirits as well on what they're doing there. We're going to talk about how suppliers can spot opportunities in this market, trends, and more importantly, what kind of customers they deal with, so that you can find value in that. So Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming by the office.
Great, it's fantastic. Just give us a little background about yourself personally, how you ended up here.
I grew up in the wine business with my family. I've been with the CIATTI company now for 19 years. And how I ended up getting into this business was a handful of friends. A lot of the partners that belong to this business and stuff like that grew up in my hometown. And I needed a job real bad, so I started calling them and calling them and calling them like I do today for the rest of my sales job.
Nice. You still like cold call every day, a little bit? 5 or 6 calls? What's up? I'm introducing myself.
Not so much, after so many years of doing it, right, you've established enough of a rapport and you have a clientele list that you kind of know you can go to. But, there's always those new products that come out. There's always new people that we're trying to meet, especially as jobs change around in the wine industry. So, yeah, sometimes there's a cold call that's involved.
Nice. Super. So let's start with the role of a wine broker, right? I believe the old classic definition of a broker is helping a buyer and seller do a deal. So how do you define a role of CIATTI in the wine trade?
It's part business partner, it's part friend, it's understanding the marketplace. Wine is such a unique agricultural product compared to other commodities and other respects to other beverages and stuff. So, understanding what is happening, especially on the bulk wine side, which is a very fast-paced moving market. And if you ever see some of our reports, you see how some of the changes can drastically happen within 30 days. And as we deal in some of the other products that happen out there, they're a very slow-moving market. Like when you're doing grape sales or you're doing concentrate deals, these things they're a little bit longer relationship-wise, and they drag out. But bulk wine can change very rapidly, as we're seeing in some markets right now.
Hey guys, so we are right in the sample room of CIATTI. This is where all the action happens. This is really, the product they're representing. So Todd, explain me how this works. Like, how have you shelved, what is the reason behind merchandising it this way?
Yeah, no, so it's all split out by flavor and vintage at this point in time. So if you go down each one of these things, you're going to find where it goes to a Cabernet, to a Pinot Noir, to a Zinfandel section, back from a Merlot, and then it goes from vintage moving its way up and where it's coming from. So it could be anywhere from a Cabernet, and it starts with Napa, Sonoma, Paso Robles, California, and then vintage going that way.
Got it.
It's not the best organizational
No, it's
system,
all right.
but it works for us.
So it's by grapes you've done.
This is by grapes in here. This is all done by
And then
grapes and regions.
In the grapes there are regions basically, right? So bulk wine data or private label data in US is still very hard to find, right, publicly because of our 3-tier systems and many other reasons. Give us some insights on how big is this business of bulk wine? Like how much bulk wine trading happens? How much private label is going on? Just share some insights there.
Well, again, the numbers are hard. So for even me to equate it, if I'm selling it to a winery, a bulk wine to a winery, or for a private label gig, or if I'm selling it to them for their own brands, or they're selling it to them for another business transaction, it's hard for me to even quantify a lot of that stuff because we don't know a lot of times where the end product is and where the end product is actually going to end up. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It kind of goes back and forth. Traditionally, 10 so years ago, a majority of wine was moved through a broker. Now, and with consolidation that's happened in California, with the brands and the distribution consolidation that's happened over the last couple of years, that those percentage of numbers has really dwindled down a lot. It's mostly been on a need to buy basis in most cases where bulk wine is happening.
Okay, so let's dissect this, right? Like I want to know really about the type of the customers and type of the people you deal with, right? So there are growers, there are wineries that make wine, and then there are bottlers you may be selling for, or big chains. So give me a scenario of type of the customers and what are the needs normally. Can be buying or selling need, right?
Yeah. It's funny when I first started with CIATTI back in 2004. All my Rolodex consisted of mostly production people, winemakers, lab, cellar workers, maybe a finance person, maybe someone a little bit on the executive side of a winery. Now it ends up being a lot more finance people, executives, presidents, general managers, and stuff like that. And have definitely moved somewhere away from the winemaking status of it because it's just the cost of where it's gone. But when we look at some of the deals that happen currently, what's going on in the wine industry today, if you're from a buyer's side, most of the contact is, I need this, I need to refill this, I need to get this program, I need this vintage, and that's a very specific buying degree of what they're going for. They're not going for, I need I want to grow this market, or I want to expand this area, or I want to get into this.
So it's to fill their current demands. That's the number one. And that is currently. And the type of the customer is the winery in this case.
In this case, it's always the winery.
I have this much of repeat Cabernet sales from my current brand, and now this year it's less vintage, so I'm going to get some bulk wine.
There's always going to be that, especially when we come off the last couple of years here domestically in California, where we've come off some shorter crops. Especially in certain areas, whether you're in Napa or Sonoma, and some people really need to backfill what they missed out on the grapes. So you find your business kind of drawing you towards some of those deals at this point in time.
Cool. So I'm not trying to, take business away from CIATTI here, but here's a classic case where how do you know what winery needs, from like, let's say internet, or how someone sitting from Australia or Argentina knows what this winery in Napa needs, which grape they need. So I believe that's why you guys exist, right?
Yeah, that's exactly why we exist. You can look at that a couple different ways. Currently, just the way we're talking about it today in 2023, as we sit here, it's such an on-demand buying situation. I can't say that enough. We're in the past, you've always seen the opportunities existed because, said retailer or said winery has a contract with an open market.
So it's one-time deals right now going on?
A lot of it's spot market, as we call it. Spot market deals is what we're going to call it. Not a lot of contract work moving forward.
All right.
The contract work has slowed up a lot over the last couple of years.
But that's so bad in one way, right? For planning purpose?
Well, it's planning purposes, but people, it's just goes to go with the trend is of today, right? As we talked about the spirits program, and people just, the trend of what people are drinking, what people want to drink today. The wine is a traditional product that's usually been on tables for dinners and classic occasions and celebrations of some sort. And at this point in time, you get the feeling that a lot of people are selling, maybe buy one bottle of wine for that night, but not buy the full case for that situation.
So I understood the winery buying demand sort of requirement, right? Now, what about the selling part? Like, I've just made extra Chardonnay. So
Well,
how that works?
oh yeah, no, the selling part of it is where I think the relationship with your broker and the relationship with the knowing the marketplace helps out the most, right? Where the buyers are, what the cost or the pricing is at this point in time, who can take volume, who can't take volume, that's where we can really shine brightly, is when we're helping out the seller and understanding where it is. When is the best deal? When is not the good deal? How long to wait? How long not to wait? These kinds of things. What's going on with your wine? Why people? What the feedback is on your wine and or your product at that point in time.
Got it. So, give me an example of what goes to the buyer, right? So this is your sample box, let's say, and you're going to ship it to the buyer. What other information are you sending? Simply this? That's
simply just the bottles with the percentages on it. And if you have more questions or if you need more information, then you contact your broker.
And then what's your selling process? Let's say you've sent them the information, and then what's your follow-up like? Like, hey, just want to make sure you got the samples, and then how much time you follow up after?
And depending on what it is and how many samples they've gotten. I mean, there's some of that is predicated on the fact that if we have a lot of Zinfandel in the marketplace at this point in time, and you're the buyer at this point in time, Sid, I could send you upwards of 15, 30, 60 bottles of wine. I don't know if you want to taste through all those different wines.
Understood.
But there could be a lot of criteria that match what you're trying to buy at this point in time. And so that's when the follow-up process becomes more of like just a conversation. Like, hey, did you get it? What did you think? What are you talking about price-wise? How much volume do you really need at this point in time? Do you need to buy multiple truckloads or just one truckload? Can you afford to do it at $10? Can you find the trucking to get all the logistics part of it too becomes a part of the negotiation process as well.
So I'm just going a little deeper so I understand the business, right? So I guess let's say in Australia, someone make a lot of Shiraz this year. Now they've told you help us sell Shiraz at the best price we can. For example, that's simple as that, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're going to reach out to some of your customers around the world, wineries in this case, saying, hey, you need Shiraz to blend and blah, blah, blah. I'll send you some samples. And then maybe back and forth, some tweaks happen. And then is that how you already have a database, I'm imagining, of some buyers with their needs? Like, okay, Todd, every time there is Shiraz, let me know. Or one time there is a price which falls under $1 a gallon, let me know, and so on.
You're getting good at this. Yeah, that's exactly right. That is where we would deal with on the buyer side. We, making sure we have that information easy to accessible for us to make sure that when we are talking to the sellers, because obviously when we're trying to put two sides of the market together, two sides as a relationship together, you want to make sure you're talking about the right things at the right time. So that we work a lot as brokers to make sure that we have all the buyer information, know exactly where you are, what the cost is, what you need to get out of it, where, and vice versa. You're dealing with the seller and stuff like that, telling them, hey, I don't know if you have a market that's going to exist here. Whatever it is, don't add more additives to it. Let's not put any more oak on the wine. Let's not add costs to it, because we don't know if we're going to recoup those costs. And so we spend a lot of time doing that.
What's a good deal look like, right? Like, the timing of it. Like some winery told you, okay, I've got this much gallons or tons left. How fast do you think you can move? If they just give you freedom that at any price, get me the deal, I want this juice out.
Yeah. No, I mean, motivation for selling is different for everybody, right? Okay. Rather we get sometimes pressures from banks that need to get some cash flow into that for that
who's
thing.
Financing the winery?
For financing it. Rather it be, hey, guess what? We need to empty that tank because we need it open for the next coming harvest. Rather it be, hey, guess what? We just lost this portion of our market, and our distributor is not going to pick us up in here. We need to get rid of this because it's not a thing. So motivation is different for everybody. And sometimes when we represent the bulk industry, especially when we talk about pricing and stuff like that, we put them in major ranges. We put the prices in ranges when we display them to everybody else, because we don't know 100% why you're making that deal. Somebody in a market that's a $10 market might sell it for $5 just for the simple fact that their bank is telling them, hey, guess what? It's time this month, you need to pay, and you need to get some money in here right now, versus, hey, I'm in a good position. I don't know it. I lost this market, but this one right here I'm entering in, I could use my Chardonnay over here. I don't have to sell it for $10 today. I might hold out for $10 or $11 or $12 and see where the market takes me as we get closer to harvest. And especially now we're getting into domestically here in California where the grape crop, we're trying to gauge what's going to happen with the grape crop. And that usually has some kind of effect on which you're going to either be a buyer and or a seller in this market, depending on what the vineyards are doing at this point in time.
One of the things that fascinates me is, because wineries or producers don't want their name to come out, right? That they can't just openly put it on their website that I'm selling my excess Shiraz. Otherwise, obviously, discounting will start from other current buyers. So that is good for the brokerage business because you can exist because they want privacy and they prefer this route, right? But on the flip side, how are you restricting buyers and sellers information? Like, isn't that a fear that obviously a winery knows who's buying and then they go direct in the second deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a fear. We fight that all the time. We hope and we sit around, and that most of the conversations that we have a strong enough relationship with both sides of the parties to make us realize that we are a benefit to you on both sides, right? We're adding some kind of value to the deal.
Go with contracts and NDAs and those kind of things where it's 5 years they just can't deal with the buyer?
Not on a spot market situation, for sure, not that. Spot market is more of, like you said, being relevant and staying current with what's going on in the industry. Yeah, if it gets to some contract terms and there's some longer stuff, some of those lawyer-ese stuff comes into play.
Cool.
But for the most part, like as we'll see later, as you start to look at the sample room and everything like that, it's mostly just being a partner in your business. We want to make sure that we give you the best information to make the best decisions at that time possible. That's what our goal is.
What are your challenges that you've found in bulk wine suppliers, like which they really face, and which you've seen some other bulk wine suppliers handle it nicely? So give me an example of 3 or 4 problems. Like one of them, you said logistics. And how is someone who's done it nicely, give us some solutions so that other people can learn as well.
Yeah, and logistics in terms of just cost overall and just handling costs that's happened over the years, whether it be fuel surcharges, whether it be just lack of containers that are being able to do it, has become a bigger problem. I mean, it's really kind of a newer problem over the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, just kind of as we've seen with shipping as goes around the world, as we've talked about so many times at the IBWSS in San Francisco, right? But some of the things that, and getting better at it, I don't really have a good solution. I don't have, again, to use one of your trigger words, there's no break or there's no hack.
Growth hack,
yeah. To get past it. You just kind of have to have that relationship to make sure that you can get the product to where you need it to be, especially when we're talking about logistics and costs. I mean, we're just watching costs go up, whether it be in vineyards here domestically, whether it be in bottles that are happening, closures, printed boxes,
I was chatting
everything
with
that makes
one of the big shipping companies as well, who helps in freight forwarding. So he did mention that now buyers want suppliers to add the logistics cost to give them an accurate estimate, because it's just is waiving so much that, let's say even if it's $1 a gallon, but then logistics can be 10,000 a container or 4,000 a container, right? So I think buyers are calculating that very seriously now.
It's in a very short time, it's become a bigger issue in a very short time. I mean,
they're moving, changing decisions just because of logistics.
100%. Yeah. No, we've had deals here domestically, just in California, because of the trucking flowing from one end of the state to the other is too expensive. We're having to come in from Washington, even though they want the product and they like it, and it's from Washington State. The cost of getting that back down to their winery or their bottling facility here in California is prohibitive.
Let's say, tips for the bulk wine suppliers out there, whose majority of the business is selling bulk wine.
Yes.
What would be your best 5 tips to sort of, run a business on a macro level? How do you frame it? How do you prepare? What are the mistakes they just lose money on what they should not do?
And timing is everything. Timing is everything. Can't say it enough.
So what do you mean by timing?
Timing
Where does it apply?
It applies when it comes to vintages, right? When we're changing over vintages, right?
Okay.
It applies to when we're talking about whites and red wines, right? We're talking about Chardonnay or Cabernet or your favorite Syrahs, as you keep on going back towards. So the understanding the timing of the market, and again, because the bulk wine market changes so quickly, that timing could be upset at any point, right? So we're right now as a traditional seller in this marketplace, we're getting towards the end of what would be the white wine season, right? Where
because summer buying's done, sort of thing?
Summer's buying's done. You're kind of getting into finishing up the bottlings for your white, so you know what the numbers look like for your marketplace, and you're not going to go any further.
So that means what? Now if someone wants to sell their white, they're not going to get a good price?
Or you're going to start diminishing returns. You're going to start, maybe not a good price, maybe not necessarily the highest market price.
Because now so much need is there for the seller to just empty their
Now it's just empty, moving on and getting to the next one.
It can also mean that it's a good time to buy right now.
And you could be an opportunity. Exactly.
If you have the holding cash power or something like that?
100%. No, and some people that we deal with on the buying side, that's exactly the conversation you're having with them and say, hey, here we go. We're getting to the end of Sauvignon Blanc. Maybe it's time for you to start thinking about the pricing is coming back towards where you want it to be or where you need it to be for your specific product or your specific retailer that you're dealing with.
Okay.
There's a lot of those conversations.
So timing. Then what about preparing the deck? Like, if Todd asked me that, hey Sid, you are this winery, I want to sell your Chardonnay to someone else, send me some information. So what do you expect the winery to send you?
Well, it's based on samples. It's always based on what's in the bottle, right? I mean, you can send me all the lab results. You can send me all the accolades that you've sent over all the years with all of your wines. But because the wine is in a static state, and it's in that bottle, it's whatever you're showing up with the sample. As we tell a lot of sellers and stuff like that, okay, thank you for telling us that you have, 1,000 gallons and it's Chardonnay and it's from Russian River. That's great. We like that information. That helps us out. Mm-hmm. But we can't sell anything unless we have the sample in front of them. Mm-hmm. It's hard for us to prove to somebody that just because you have it Russian River and you have all the right stuff, but we needed to have an actual sample to taste. Because that's where the proof in the pudding is, right?
Got it.
And we spend a lot of effort to make sure that people understand that we, and when you put your product into a bottle, make sure you do it with some care and with some thought behind it too, because we find a lot of people, obviously on the bulk side of it, that sometimes don't take as much care when they're sampling, don't take as much care.
That's where the decision is made, basically.
Because when there's a tasting, there's lined up, and you're with 20 other people that are in the tasting, you want them to pull the bottles forward, as we always say, instead of pushing the bottles backward.
On this quantity, right? Like by the time, obviously they're not just relying on you to sell. They have this 50,000 gallons, and then they're just trying 10 different angles to move their 50,000 gallons.
Correct.
How do you ensure, like you're talking to a big buyer, and then they say finally your deal happens, and then by the time it's not 50,000 gallon left?
I mean, there's always a discrepancy in volume. I mean, that's
fine. It's understood.
It's always.
And then you just say the buyer, it's now 32 only left.
Yeah, I mean, and then do you have a second place sample that you liked in the backfilled if you really need that full volume, right?
Got it.
But usually it doesn't drop drastically, right? It doesn't move so much. So if we're talking about 50,000 gallons and the deal is 50,000 gallons, it usually doesn't get much below, maybe there's a truckload gone. So 6,000 gallons might be disappeared from the tank, or they might have done something else with it, but it doesn't drastically drop. If it drastically drops like the 32 or something like that, that might be a different conversation you have to have, right? That might be something you have to address with the seller at that point in time.
What are the tips, on sending samples? What kind of information you expect them, and any growth hacks there? Like, all right, add some sales material with your sample box, or
not necessarily. No literature. Literature doesn't do you any good at this point.
Or what about nice screw cap or
like what I would say? Make sure that in some cases you have a finished wine first. Sometimes we get stuff in here that's unfinished, and just because they're trying to hit the market and they're trying to beat everybody to the market.
Yeah.
But there's no real hacks to it. The best conversation I can have with any seller that's really trying to enter into a marketplace is really have a conversation with your broker your CIATTI broker to understand what is selling at that point in time. Do we need to add more oak to it? Do we need to go through
Okay.
ML? Do we need to add costs to make sure we establish ourselves at the top end of the market? Now, and if the market doesn't exist and if there's no opportunities there, let's not add more costs. Let's just make sure that we put out the best product as best as possible, and let's get it out into the marketplace.
Going back on the tips for selling bulk wine, what other things, let's say, who's involved in the sales for that bulk wine, the export manager or the sales rep, how do you advise them to do biz dev?
Again, mostly just on the economic side of it, really. Just understanding that, if you've got $10 cost per gallon into your product and it's an $8 market, maybe your first offer is your best offer. And understanding the timing, because it's a rarity. We see too many markets grow after. The best way to say that? It's for expanding markets. It would have would drastically have to happen in a vineyard or in a space. Like we'd have to go back to like what happened in the pandemic, right? And some of those cases where people started having to buy everything online. People were buying it from the stores on the your off-premise places, and they were putting it into the pantry and they were stocking up. Then we saw a huge growth at that point in time for a lot of wines, whether it be red and wine on both sides. You couldn't predict that in any case. Right? That was an anomaly when it came to the season. So understanding where you are and what's happening out there is key to if you're going to be a seller and if you're understanding what's going to happen in the bulk market, if you're going to enter into this.
Got it. Let's talk about a little bit of private label part. The big chains, and especially US being 3-tier. It's not like Tesco coming out in London openly and asking for a buying need, right?
Yeah.
So till my knowledge, it works like, okay, you have bottling companies like O'Neill and Delicato, and they are the sort of the front end of the Walmarts of the world, and they prefer to work with these bottlers than directly wineries. So explain me the model of like really a common model of a big chain buyer in US, and then how does that land up to you? What kind of role you play, and how do you connect the dots with Australia or Argentina, let's say, to the Walmart?
Typically, what ends up happening is those big retailers already have brands into those retail shops and everything. So those buyers for those markets, that wine buyer for that Walmart or whatever the large retailer might be, would ask the producer, hey, can you do this for us? Can you produce this? Can you get us a Napa Chardonnay? Can you get us a Russian River Pinot Noir? Can you get us and it always kind of almost.
But then just on
dictates.
that, like they ask the producer, you said, but then they would ask a producer that's nationally approved in their chain. They will not waste time for here and there, right?
Correct. That's what I'm saying. They're going to go with somebody that's already in their store.
Like Constellation or O'Neill.
Yeah, they're going to go with somebody that's familiar.
Okay.
They have a relationship that's in their store that they know that can produce and deliver what
Even if they
they're gonna
can't produce, they can fulfill the bulk requirement.
That's what happened, and that's where they go. So they go. I'm saying I'm not in a lot of those meetings, so I'm not part of those things. But you understand that they ask them, "Can you produce this?" Well, we don't have that, but we know we can source it on the bulk side of it. We can come to a.
So that's where the first chain inbound inquiry would go with the current producers that they're working with.
That's what we find most often. Yes, that's
and then let's say that
typical.
And then that producers can come to you and say, okay.
That's where we come into play at the end of the day. What it costs, how much you can source, what it looks like. Here are the samples. Start tasting and see what you like. And let's negotiate based upon what you think, what you like, and what you can do volume wise.
Cool, Todd. What about bulk spirits? What's going on there? Like what's CIATTI doing there?
Well, bulk spirits is a new thing, and it's an up and coming thing. For the most part, we've seen a big change, especially when it comes to like oak additives and the oak world. So in the bourbon section of it, obviously the brandy world is very close to us when we talk about the wine product in and of itself. But then you start to see, just the way that consumers are going these days, rather it be some of these RTDs, your tequila drinks. You've tried to expand it. So we're really trying to get a good Rolodex and a good list of people who we can contact, and better yet, just be a self-added value to our customers that we're already dealing with. Because a lot of the clients that we're already dealing with are in these spaces and stuff like that. Just need to have the information to make the best business decision they can make, and especially if you're going to try and get into the business at this point in time too.